I still remember the exact moment I realized my parents had stopped seeing me as their daughter. It happened during my younger brother Daniel's graduation dinner. The restaurant was glowing with soft golden lights, everyone laughing, glasses clinking together, while my mother proudly showed his photos to strangers like he had just changed the world. "And this is my son," she kept saying proudly. "He's going into finance. He's going to be very successful." Then someone looked at me and asked, "And what do you do?" Before I could even answer, my father smiled awkwardly and waved his hand. "Oh, Emma just works some office job downtown. Nothing exciting." Nothing exciting. I laughed softly like it didn't hurt, but inside, something shattered. Because my parents had spent years treating me like I was invisible. My achievements were always small. My sacrifices were never mentioned. When I paid my own college tuition, nobody celebrated. When I worked late nights to survive, nobody noticed. But when Daniel bought a used sports car with borrowed money, they acted like he was a genius. I became used to sitting quietly at family dinners while everyone praised someone else. What hurt most wasn't the insults, it was the silence, the feeling that no matter how hard I worked, I would never matter to them. But what they didn't know that night was that I had been hiding the truth for years. You see, I wasn't just working some office job. I owned the company. 5 years earlier, I started a small cybersecurity business from my tiny apartment after losing a terrible corporate job. I barely slept. I lived off instant noodles and cheap coffee while teaching myself everything I could. There were nights I cried alone because I thought I was failing, nights I almost called my parents for encouragement, until I remembered they never believed in me anyway. So I stopped telling them about my dreams, and slowly, quietly, my company grew, until everything changed. That graduation dinner ended with my mother raising her glass and saying, "Daniel is the future of this family." Everyone applauded. Then my phone rang. I looked down and froze when I saw the caller ID. It was the governor's office requesting confirmation for the cybersecurity contract my company had just won, a contract worth millions. But what I didn't know that day was that answering that phone would expose everything. At first, I ignored the call. I didn't want attention. I didn't want another awkward moment where my family pretended to care about me for 5 seconds before returning to Daniel again. But the phone kept vibrating against the table. My father sighed loudly. "Emma, can you turn that thing off for once?" Before I could react, Daniel smirked and grabbed my phone. "Maybe it's another customer complaining," he joked. Everyone laughed. But then his expression changed. The room suddenly became quiet. Daniel slowly looked at me before handing me the phone. They're asking for the CEO." I felt every eye in the restaurant turn toward me. I stood up carefully and answered the call outside. My hands were shaking. The governor's assistant congratulated me on securing the contract and confirmed tomorrow's press conference. She also mentioned several investors already waiting for my approval. When I walked back inside, my family looked completely different. My mother stared at me with confusion. What was that about? I sat down slowly. My company won a state contract. Silence. Daniel laughed nervously. "What company?" I looked directly at him. "The company I own." I'll never forget my father's face. It was like he was trying to solve a puzzle he never expected to exist. "You own a company?" he whispered. I nodded quietly. "For 5 years now." Suddenly, everyone wanted details. Questions came from every direction. How much is the contract worth? How long have you been hiding this? Why didn't you tell us? That last question almost made me laugh. Why didn't I tell them? Because every time I tried to share my dreams growing up, they ignored me. Every achievement was dismissed before it even mattered. They spent years convincing me I was ordinary, and eventually I believed them. But the worst happened later that night. After dinner, my mother pulled me aside in the parking lot. Tears filled her eyes as she grabbed my hand. "Emma," she whispered, "we always knew you were smart." No, they didn't. If they had believed in me, they wouldn't have spent years treating me like background noise in my own family. But the betrayal became even deeper the next morning. Daniel called me asking for money. Not congratulations, not apology, money. He wanted to invest in his failing business idea because now I was family. That word almost destroyed me. Family. The same people who ignored my struggles suddenly wanted access to my success. And that was the moment something inside me changed forever. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to earn love from people who only valued status. I realized they didn't suddenly see me differently because I changed. They changed because my success became visible. And honestly, that truth hurt more than every insult combined. A week later, my company held a large press conference downtown. News cameras filled the building lobby, reporters crowded around asking questions, while investors shook my hand one after another. I wore a black suit and stood confidently behind the podium, but inside, my heart still carried years of pain. Then I saw them walk in, my parents and Daniel. They looked nervous, almost overwhelmed, standing among people they once believed were far above me. My mother smiled proudly at strangers nearby. "That's my daughter," she whispered. Hearing those words should have healed me, but instead, they broke something inside me all over again. Because where was that pride when I was struggling alone? Where was that love when I worked double shifts to survive? Where was that support when everyone else doubted me? The press conference ended with applause after I announced scholarships for young women starting businesses with no financial support. And then I did something my family never expected. I thanked every mentor, employee, and friend who believed in me during my hardest years, but I never mentioned my parents. Not once. Afterwards, my father approached me quietly. His voice cracked as he spoke. "We didn't realize how much we hurt you." For a moment, I saw genuine regret in his eyes, and honestly, that was the revenge. Not money, not success, not public embarrassment. The real revenge was watching them realize they ignored someone who only ever wanted love. I didn't scream at them. I didn't humiliate them. I simply stopped begging for validation from people who couldn't see my worth until the world showed it to them first. Over time, I slowly rebuilt boundaries with my family. Some wounds healed, others never fully disappeared. But I finally understood something important. Your value does not shrink just because other people refuse to see it. Sometimes the people closest to you are too distracted by appearances to recognize your quiet strength. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is succeed without needing their approval anymore. That night, after the cameras disappeared and the building became quiet again, I stood alone near the city lights and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I no longer felt invisible, not because my parents finally noticed me, but because I finally noticed my own worth.